All right, welcome back. It's time to get back into our TI11 previews where I preview each and every single team attending this year's International. I've already finished half of the teams at this point, so in case you've missed them, feel free to check out the link in the description down below or just my most recent videos on my channel. And I will be finishing off every single team before the start of the Last Chance qualifiers on October 8th. And before that as well, I will also be doing my TI11 predictions as well as my Last Chance qualifier preview. So if you don't want to miss any of that, subscribe, hit the bell so you don't miss any of that. And as well in the description is a link to our Discord. Join that if you're at all curious about that. But yeah, let's preview the Gaimin Gladiators, who after last season were not even playing under this tag at all. They were actually known as Viking GG, and even heading into this season, they weren't even known as Viking GG. They got let go by that organization and were playing under their own name, Team Tickles, which thankfully did not last very long because that's a pretty bad team name, and they got picked up by Gaimin Gladiators. And what a fantastic past year for this team. Maybe they didn't end things off as strongly as they maybe would have hoped, but regardless, I think these guys blew every single expectation that people had for them out of the water entirely. I mean, we've seen time and time and again teams who dominate the lower division in Western Europe. They go perfect 7-0, maybe 6-1. Regardless, they look really, really strong, and they're heading into Western Europe's upper division. They should be one of the new top contending teams in the region as a whole, and then they make it to the upper division and they get absolutely dumpstered. They go 0-7, 1-6, and immediately get sent right back down to the lower division. We've seen this with teams like Cool Guys and Hellbear Smashers, who actually got destroyed so hard it disbanded their entire teams, and Brame, who actually had that happen twice now, where they've made it to the upper division and gotten sent right back down. And for Team Tickles, we didn't know whether that was going to be the case for them. Were they going to be a team that was going to get absolutely smashed back down, or were they going to maybe keep their head above water, maybe finish 6th or 5th place? You know, not great, but at least they're not getting relegated. I don't think anyone was expecting a top 2 finish from them right out of the gate, or a first place finish from them in those regional finals. Granted, to be fair, no one was expecting that we were going to be having regional finals at all at that point. We were supposed to have a major, but then that whole situation happened. But regardless, before we get too far into it, in total, this past DPC season, Gaimin Gladiators finished with a total of 1,130 DPC points. They finished 3rd place regionally and 10th place internationally, which means they qualified a TI based on DPC points alone. And looking at this roster, again, you wouldn't expect too much from this roster heading in this season. A lot of these players are coming in from a lot of different teams within the same region, but it just kind of worked. Duraccio, their new carry player that they brought in the offseason, he has actually never even been to TI. Same thing goes for every single member on this team besides their offlaner, Ace, who has been to TI twice at this point. The first time, he finished top 6 at TI 8 with Team Secret, and then the next time at TI 9, he didn't even make it out of the group stages with Ninjas in Pajamas. So he's looking for, hopefully, a little bit of a deeper run there. But for Duraccio, the closest he's ever been to TI was finishing 9th to 12th place in the TI-10 qualifiers in the CIS region with Windstrike. For Boom, 9th to 12th place with Viking GG in the TI-10 qualifiers. Same thing for Celery. And for Tofu, finishing 7th and 8th place with the Hellbear Smashers in the TI-10 qualifiers as well. So for a lot of these members, it will be their first international, which is always exciting, always super fun to see new players entering the scene, including for their coach, Immortal Faith, who you might recognize from making all of the Dota 2 guides that you might use all the time. The closest he's ever been to TI was in through open qualifiers, but I didn't bother including it on the list here. Regardless, a lot of fresh players, super exciting to see how they do. And again, their results speak for themselves, and maybe they didn't end things off as strongly as they wished, but regardless, a 2nd place finish in Western Europe's upper division, yeah, you'll take that. They go 5-2, getting themselves 180 DPC points right off the bat. But immediately people are asking, you know, was this just them taking advantage of the situation? Was it a fluke? I mean, a lot of teams in this region, especially since it was so close to TI-10, were going through some pretty hefty roster changes. It was taking them some time to kind of come together. Teams like Team Secret come to mind immediately. So was this actually a testament of how strong they were, or was it just them taking advantage of the fact that other teams were going through this arrested development? Well, they would shut that up pretty quickly by finishing first place in the regional finals, going 3-1 in total. In fact, beating Team Liquid after losing to them in the regional finals as well to claim themselves 250 DPC points right there. Heading into Tour 2, they keep up with that momentum, finishing second place, tying for first place actually right behind OG. But since OG won that head-to-head, they would end up placing ahead of them. But regardless, they get themselves 240 DPC points, and they would be attending the first official major of the DPC year, where they would translate their regional success into LAN success, which is pretty rare. Usually that is a step that a lot of teams have a hard time with, where, you know, they'll have a lot of success within their own region, but they'll really struggle against teams from their own, from different regions that may have different play styles, different draft styles. Yeah, Gaimin Gladiators adapted very, very quickly. Granted, there were no Chinese teams at this major, but still a top 4 finish nonetheless, where they go 3-2-1 in the group stage and 2-2 on the main stage, earning themselves 460 more DPC points. However, again, as I previously mentioned, a bit of regression in Tour 3, where they end up finishing 6th place. In fact, they actually had to play a tiebreaker match against Goon Squad just to avoid getting relegated. That's how close they were. That went to a game 3. They go 2-5. They miss out on the major, 0 DPC points. Was this a fluke? I would say maybe. I wouldn't get too worried. This was a pretty hectic past tour, but you can really see it in this portion here when we get into the TI11 teams, which we're going to be doing now, that it gets especially red near over here. So kicking things off in Tour 1, they would lose 2-1 to Team Liquid early on, but then they would follow that up with a really impressive win over teams like OG and Tundra, who had a ton of momentum and a ton of hype behind them at this point. But then they would lose to Team Secret, which was a little odd because at that point, Team Secret was struggling quite a bit. But regardless, pretty impressive. And then at the regional finals, they take down teams like Tundra 2-0. They lose to Liquid 2-0, but they would come back and beat them in the finals and beat OG along the way as well. So a lot of really stacked teams in those regional finals. And I think on paper, looking at them, people probably had Gaimin Gladiators finishing last out of all of them, and they end up finishing first place. Impressive run. In Tour 2, they would start things off very strongly, taking down teams like Entity 2-1, Team Secret 2-0. They would lose 2-0 to OG, but then they would follow that up with nice wins over Tundra and Team Liquid. And heading into the Stockholm Major, they would start things off with a tie against TSN FTX. They would beat the defending TI champions Team Spirit, lose to Team Liquid, tie against Awaken. They would then beat Fnatic in T1, and then on the main stage, they would then lose to TSM FTX. Which would drop them down to the lower bracket where they would face Beast Coast. They would beat them, but then they would not be able to overcome OG in the lower bracket semifinals, which is where they would eventually get eliminated from the Stockholm Major. And that leads us into Tour 3, where, as you can see here, out of 5 series that they played against other teams attending this year's International, including the Last Chance qualifiers, they only won 1 game. They go 1-10, which brings their win-loss record against teams attending this year's International from 30-21 all the way to an even 31-31. So this last tour, very hefty on their win-loss. Taking a look now at their official stats, this is for every single match throughout the entire DPC, which, as you can see, is very close to the amount of teams that they played that are attending this year's International, because there are just so many teams from Western Europe attending. It's the region with the most teams in contention for the attendance. Played a total of 80 games, 47-33 records, so pretty impressive. On Radiant, they go 29-18. On Dire, they go 18-15. On First Pick, they go 24-19. And Last Pick, they go 23-14. So most notably, Radiant and Last Pick were their strongest orientations, which actually, when you had them together, was not that strong, because they only went 6-6 when they had both of those orientations together. However, on Radiant First Pick, they went 23-12. On Dire First Pick, they went 11-7. And on Dire Second Pick, they actually went for a total of 7-8. For games that were less than 40 minutes, they were 42-20, which was astoundingly high, a 68% win rate, especially when you compare that to their win rates for games that were longer than 40 minutes, where they were actually very much in the red, going 5-13. For game 1s, they were 19-16. Game 2s, they were 20-15, so slightly above 50% for both of those there. But in game 3s, overall, very solid in those deciding games, 78% win rate, going 7-2. For their average GPM, 2301, average XPM, 2808, which I believe is the highest that we've seen so far of the teams we've previewed. An average KDA of 3.70, and an average match duration of 34 minutes and 41 seconds, which, if I'm not mistaken, is by far the lowest average match duration that we've seen. And again, when you see how many games they have played that were less than 40 minutes here in comparison to the games that were over 40 minutes, that makes a whole lot of sense. They are very, very good in those quick games, and we saw that a lot specifically in the first tour when we saw them in those regional finals running those very fast tempo drafts. Specifically, the IO Storm Spirit draft is the first one that comes to mind, which absolutely crushed teams, specifically in the grand finals. But yeah, definitely something to look out for this team. They win very fast, but typically if the games go a little bit longer, that's when their weaknesses start to show. And finally, for their hero stats, they picked a total of 73 different heroes. Their most played being Enchantress with 20, Bane with 18, Mars and Io with 17 each, Storm Spirit with 16, and Weaver and Ember Spirit with 15. Their best heroes being Legion Commander, who went 5-0. We then had Storm Spirit, who went 14-2. A very, very high win rate. And again, alluding back to that IO Storm Spirit draft that they were running a lot near the start of the season. Storm Spirit has since seen some nerfs at that point, but I would still be surprised if we didn't see any Storm Spirit at all from Gaimin Gladiators. It is a pretty popular hero, and it's pretty rare that we ever see anyone ignore Storm Spirit throughout an entire tournament, especially when they've been as successful on it. Razor 6-1, Chaos Knight 8-2, Tidehunter 11-3, and finally Ember Spirit, who goes 11-4. For their worst heroes, we have Tusk, who went 1-5, Puck, who went 3-7, and Void Spirit, who went 2-4. And finally, for their most banned, they banned a total of 89 different heroes. Topping that list would be Invoker with 29, which makes sense. A lot of pretty notable Invoker players in Western Europe. Stormer comes to mind right off the bat, although Entity didn't join the upper division until Tour 2. But regardless, Razor with 25, very prominent meta hero throughout this past year, including Timbersaw. When you're playing against ATF as much as you are, yeah, Timbersaw is going to show up quite a bit. So, Gaimin Gladiators, again, fantastic year. Will this be a fluke? This is the only part of this entire past year that may foreshadow maybe a little bit of an early exit for Gaimin Gladiators. And personally, I would think that this is just a fluke. I'm expecting this team to still do quite well. We've seen them do very, very well in group stages in the one land that they played in this year. It is a small sample size, but overall, I think these guys are at least bound for the main event. I'd be very surprised, very, very surprised if they got knocked out in the group stage. I'd be probably placing them near the middle of their group, maybe making it upper bracket, probably making it lower bracket, but either way, I think they're in contention for that upper bracket at the very least. But again, it's going to come down to if they're able to win games quickly, which is something that was changed recently. With the changes to BKB and Refresher, games seem to be extending a little bit longer. You know, it's not just first item BKB into first Roshan, into map control, into second Roshan, into GG anymore. Games are getting a little bit extended out, games are getting longer, more farming is taking place, and so we'll see if that ends up taking a little bit of a toll on Gaimin Gladiators. We have yet to see them play an official match on this new patch since those changes, and so that is something that I'm super stoked to see. So let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. As always, let me know what you guys think. How far do you think they'll make it in the tournament? Do you think they're destined for a deep run on the main event like they did at Stockholm, or will they flounder like they did at the third tour in Western Europe? Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll be talking about Tundra in my next preview, and that will be coming out in the next few days. Again, every single team that I haven't covered yet will be out before October 8th. So, yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Bye.